I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're communing with the Great Ones so we can divine a ranking of all 19 Bloodborne areas from worst to best. This is part 1 of 2 where we'll discuss areas 19th through 11th. Tune in next week for part 2 where we discuss my top 10 areas in Bloodborne. And if you're new here, feel free to check out my Bloodborne boss ranking I did last week. Click the card in the top right corner, or you can check out my Soulsborne playlist after the video, I've got tons. Now before we get started, only 2% of my viewers are subscribed. Let's rectify that by parrying that subscribe button. I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2023, and you can help. Without further ado, let's rank all 19 Bloodborne areas, and be sure to let me know your personal opinions in the comments below, as long as you stay respectful. Wow, the Nightmare Frontier, what an original and never before made choice for the worst area in Bloodborne. Feeling daring today, are we, Billy? I couldn't be contrarian here. No matter how much I love to buck societal norms, the Nightmare Frontier is just your classic Miyazaki poison swamp, complete with slow movement in the poison, a whole host of annoying enemies to deal with, and an incredibly bland, undersaturated aesthetic design. This area feels like they had a ton of Tombstone assets and just said, let's make this rocky outcrop of a level and see what sticks. There are two main paths that both ultimately lead to the giant poison swamp on the far side. You can either go straight there past a few hunter enemies, or take a detour to the left side of the area where you have to deal with giants hurling boulders at you. This path can lead to some upper caves linking back to the main swamp with a few nice goodies, but you can also fall victim to Patches the Spider and find yourself face first in a poisonous chasm, home to parasitic leeches, and at the very end, a winter lantern. One of the best visual enemy designs FromSoft has ever conceived, and yet they use one of the most annoying mechanics. They inflict frenzy on the player, which I can guarantee new players will get destroyed by them. Their grabs are hard to avoid while micromanaging your frenzy meter and needing to consume sedatives. And they do appear multiple times throughout the level, though 2 of the 3 lanterns here are optional to fight. What's worse though is if you're online. This is one of the few areas in the game where you can be invaded, so if you don't kill the specific Bell Maiden, your progress will be halted by other players. Why is the poison swamp area, along with all these pieces of environment you can get stuck on, one of the main PvP locations? This area just feels like a complete slog to get through and isn't worth the effort it takes to get to. I don't even think it has any lore relevance to the story, it really is just the PvP place. The only aspect of this level I like is an aesthetic choice with all the Nightmare Realms in Bloodborne, where you can actually see them layered atop each other. The fishing hamlet ship masts rest just below the frontier, and up above you can see the Nightmare of Mensis. Pretty cool concept, but it's not unique to the Nightmare Frontier, so Nightmare Frontier, last place. Perhaps the laziest area in Bloodborne's main game, the lecture building acts as a transitional area between the Waking World and the 2 base game Nightmare Realms. It's nothing more than a couple of rooms in a moderately sized rectangular building. There's not a lot to find here beyond the Augur of Ebrietas spell and an anti-clockwise metamorphosis rune. Slime scholars fill the halls and they're pretty easy to just wail on, though I'd be careful if you choose to give them a lesson in the lecture hall. Working with kids is harder than you think. For whatever reason, the lecture building feels like it doesn't need to be here. You could have been warped to the Nightmare Frontier via Patches Amygdala, and the Nightmare of Mensis through Mikolash's corpse. I genuinely don't understand its purpose in the game or the lore, having been drawn into the Nightmare when there was a perfectly good level in the game it could have been placed at instead. I genuinely don't have anything witty or interesting to add. This area is so small and basic, and the only interesting points of note are Patches, who you can scare for a creepy animation, as well as some important notes about the 3rd umbilical cords needed to unlock the Moon Presence fight, which could have been placed anywhere else. Maybe at Bergenworth? It's only not in last place because it's inoffensive as a level, whereas the Poison Swamp is just bad. YouTube comments, let me give you a mission. I'm forcing my responsibilities onto you. Say something nice about the lecture building for me, and the best compliment will get pinned. Gracias! At number 17, Byrgenwerth is the location in-game where the lecture building should have been placed. This school of learning was built up throughout the first half of the game in item descriptions, character dialogue, the cutscene of Lawrence leaving Master Willem. And yet, despite Byrgenwerth being such a focal point of the story, with almost every major character in the cast stemming from there as scholars or being connected to Byrgenwerth, the area is a single small building that you loop around once, enter, fight a hunter, find a key, and then go out onto the balcony where the boss is. There's no depth to this place. Its main purpose is to serve as the turning point from the gothic horror of the beasts to the Lovecraftian horror of the beyond. This is best emphasized with the enemy variety, Garden of Eyes that inflict frenzy, brain suckers that consume insight, and whatever the heck this thing is from the Chalice dungeons that can summon meteors from the cosmos. But nothing comes close to the danger of Willem's assistant and her threaded cane that will, as the kids say, whip yo booty. While hunter enemies have gotten easier for me over multiple playthroughs, I still remember getting my ass handed to me on a silver platter by this girl my first time through. I just can't fathom why they didn't include the lecture building here at the literal school of learning to make one larger, more impactful level that could have placed much higher in this list. A couple of couches, some bookshelves, feels like this portion of the game went through a few redesigns, and it shows. Byrgenwerth only survives not being the bottom of my list by having decent lore significance, not being terribly hard, and because the boss arena, the Moonlit Lake, is one of the most gorgeous locations in any FromSoft game. We're knocking out these smaller areas early, as Yosefka's Clinic is the next area on our list. Most notable for being the starting location of the game, you awaken in the main room of the clinic after receiving a bit of Yharnam blood of your own. You head down some iconic stairs, and then most likely, you get murdered by a big bad wolf. Upon respawning, you'll find yourself unable to re-enter the starting room because Yosefka refuses to open the door. I know questlines shouldn't factor terribly into area rankings, but Yosefka's Clinic is heightened by her questline and the ultimate reveal of what's been going on behind that door. Yosefka's patients cannot risk infection, and she offers you her blood vial as payment, which you can restock on every time you use it while you're in Central Yharnam. There's even a piece of dialogue I didn't catch this playthrough that goes as follows. "This night is long, but morning always comes. Someone of your caliber won't fail us, I am certain. And once the night of the hunt ends, we can speak face to face. Then I can finally see what you look like. I shouldn't be thinking this, but I am rather looking forward to it." It's pretty sad when you realize that's the last thing you'll hear Yosefka say, as she's replaced by an imposter after entering Cathedral Ward, and if you talk to the imposter, you have the option to send people to her for care. This comes in useful when you meet characters like the Suspicious Beggar later in the game, who if you send to Erden Chapel, will start killing all of your survivors. But enough of Yosefka, what of the rest of the clinic? Well, it's not the most interesting area from a design standpoint. You enter through a back window by going through an amazing shortcut from the Forbidden Woods, and here you can find what the imposter has been up to. Most importantly, this area acts as a way to get the Canehurst summons, waiting on your starting bed, as well as a third umbilical cord if you kill the imposter Yosefka after the Blood Moon. This area has such a creepy vibe to it, like you're entering somewhere you shouldn't, and the tragedy of Yosefka and the horror of her imposter, a member of the choir, performing such horrifying deeds. It really emphasizes what Bloodborne is all about. Some people would consider this area as a part of the Cathedral Ward in-game, but the Healing Church Workshop para mí is a separate entity. It even has an area card. This large spiraling tower manned by old men in wheelchairs is a transitional area. Climbing upwards will get you some loot and the doorway to the Upper Cathedral Ward late game area, while exploring downwards will take you to a secret street that ultimately wraps back up to Cathedral Ward. You can only access this area by killing the blood-starved beast in Old Yharnam, one of the most ridiculous ways to unlock a door I've ever seen. I don't know how anyone figured that one out. But it's filled with these memorable old men in wheelchairs using shotguns and flamethrowers that always get a laugh out of me, and the best room in the game if you're a compulsive pot smasher. The lower streets contain a host of enemies, Yharnamites, doggos, a snatcher, and potentially your first brain sucker, a terrifying enemy that will make your life a living hell, unless you're, into that. There's also an enemy at the bottom of the Healing Church Tower that only appears in the Chalice dungeons, so you get a nice preview of them in advance. Of course, the main draw of the Healing Church Workshop is the hidden area you can access by falling like this down to a pair of double doors. Walk down some stairs and you find the abandoned Hunter's Workshop, the real-world design for your hub, the Hunter's Dream. Here you contain a third umbilical cord, a hair comb you can show the doll for a special blood gem, and most importantly, the best gear in the game. This hidden hub is the main reason this area beats the other super short ones, because it feels so personal seeing this abandoned version of your safe space. Nothing feels more disconcerting than seeing the doll lifelessly in the corner. Already, we're moving on to a higher quality of area as we discuss Yahar'gul Unseen Village. This is an endgame location that unlocks after defeating Rom at Byrgenwerth, and acts as an extension for the Hypogean Jail, which we'll get to shortly. Amygdalas litter the rooftops, and creatures of all shapes and sizes are here to stop you from interrupting the Mensis ritual. However, this area's main gimmick is not very fun. Throughout, you'll find Bell Maidens who are repeatedly summoning the very enemies you're fighting, and if you don't kill them, the enemies don't stop spawning. This is fine the first time through when you kill your first Bell Maiden and make some progress, but more likely than not, you will die before making it to the next lamp guarded by a slew of enemies, and an Amygdalan eye laser that has taken out many a player. If that happens, you start from scratch, the Bell Maidens come back, and you have to make all that progress all over again. As someone who knows where the Bell Maidens are, I still struggled this playthrough, and I don't envy first-time players who have to explore because one of the optional paths with a Bell Maiden contains the key to Upper Cathedral Ward. The lower half of Yahar'gul is basically a revisit of the jail area early in the game, except enemies have been swapped out. Instead of snatchers, you have a gank squad trio of hunters that will definitely fuck you up on a first playthrough, but they couldn't handle my Kirk hammer. And the streets are now filled with cramped caskets who can gang up on you very quickly, undead beasts, and the horrific visages of people fused into the cobbles, attempting to escape whatever was taking place here. The atmosphere is horror at its finest, masterfully crafted, but the area is let down by a host of enemies that just don't feel fun to fight for me. Of course, that comes down to personal preference, but I prefer the pre-Blood Moon enemies roaming the streets. It's still cool revisiting an area you've previously seen under a new red light, though. Also, shout out to this one jump scare that I love seeing new players react to. The final main level of the base game, the Nightmare of Mensis, may be ranked low on the list, but that doesn't mean it's a bad area, not by any stretch. I think Bloodborne's areas overall are of an extremely high quality, but the Nightmare of Mensis has a few sticking points for me that keep it out of my upper echelons. First, let's go with the positives. This area lives up to its name as a true nightmare. The environment is oppressive, the visual imagery is quite horrific, and some of the enemy designs are downright wild. The dogs with crow heads and the crows with dog heads are fucking cursed. The pigs in Murgo's loft, who are littered with eyes, are also a disgusting sight to behold. And contrary to the rest of the fanbase, I actually enjoy the Shadows of Yharnam being used as regular enemies here. It shows just how far you've come since the Forbidden Woods, they feel great to mow down, And they don't take away from the boss fight because these guys don't have the snake mode. We also have winter lanterns on the famous bridge, which is some of the most intense stealth I've done in any game. I will never get their song out of my ears. And for those struggling to get to the bridge via that elevator, roll off when you're going up the elevator, not down. Trust me, if you do it the other way, this happens. The way you're constantly wrapping back around to elevators and cages gives you a real sense of progression as you climb up the Nightmare Tower to Murgo and his wet nurse. But this level has a few issues as well. The first half, for me, is frustrating. You have the brain of Mensis causing frenzy from afar, and for players who don't know where to go their first time, they can die a lot just getting to the actual tower. This is also another PvP hotspot level, so you could get invaded at any time, which is just inconvenient when you want to press on with the game. At least you can eventually drop the brain of Mensis into the abyss, where you can do the make contact gesture with it for a special rune. But I may have forgot to record that interaction, whoops. The little stubbly enemies guarding the elevator up to the upper floors also don't do much for me, nor does the level design up to that point. But perhaps most damning of all, I have severe, and I mean severe, arachnophobia, and the giant fuck-off spider at the level's entrance triggers my fears in ways I really can't handle. Why did we need a giant spider? ¿Por qué me harías eso, joder? At number 12, we have the Hypogean Jail. We've already discussed this area to an extent in our segment on Yahar'gul, but context is important. The only way to reach this version of the jail is to be killed by a Snatcher enemy prior to the descent of the Blood Moon. You can do this most easily just outside Erden Chapel, and you're in for a treat if you do. Getting killed by an enemy and instead of respawning, being thrown into a disconcerting cutscene and awakening somewhere completely different is one of those moments that will stick with me. I loved when they did it in Dark Souls 1 with the Duke's Archives, and I love that they did it here. The atmosphere of the Hypogean Jail is somehow more disconcerting than the atmosphere of Yahar'gul, because no matter where you go, you can hear this ominous chanting in the distance. Heading outside into the streets, the road leading to the Advent Plaza is sealed shut, yet corpses are kneeling in prayer, providing you with madman's knowledge for your troubles. Giant pigs stalk the streets and snatchers litter the alleys. It's here where you can find Yahar'gul-based weapons like the Tonitrus, and if you venture back into the jail, you can find a path behind the cells leading to Dark Beast Parl. I'm sure many players got jump scared by the witches hiding behind that one doorway before getting grabbed and gouged. You can also rescue Adela the Nun by dressing as a member of the church, but fair warning, she's a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you know what I'm saying. Worth saving, don't get me wrong, but just be careful when she's back at the hub, she watches. Overall, the fear of being placed somewhere you've never been to before and being forced to find a lamp to escape, while the ominous chanting of the Mensis ritual takes place just a few locked gates away from you, will stay with me. Especially with the knowledge after going on a second playthrough that you're aware there are probably dozens of Yharnamites being sacrificed that very moment you're out there fisting a pig. Harrowing stuff, but because this area doesn't have much more to it beyond the scare factor and the shock of how you arrive, I can't rank it in my top 10. The last area on today's video, just missing out on my top 10, is Upper Cathedral Ward. Like the Hypogean Jail before it, I think Upper Cathedral Ward is a masterclass in horror and atmosphere, but in a different sense. Entering Upper Cathedral Ward and being greeted by that iconic bridge with the gnarled trees lining the sky, 2 church officials making their way towards you, and that purple-tinted skybox, it really sets a tone for the rest of the area to follow, especially as you discover a large amount of baby fetus monsters just steps away from the area lamp. That's a sentence I didn't think I'd utter in 2023. The real horror is when you enter the orphanage, as the large building ahead of you is known in the lore, for it is only lit by a single chandelier, and as you approach, large aggressive wolves tear the light from its perch, plunging the room into darkness. On a first time playthrough, this is terrifying, seeing the glint of bestial blue eyes in the dark racing towards you. Though on repeat playthroughs you learn that you can just kite the wolves with a nice sprinkling of queso. There's one memorable wolf jump scare when you grab this item at the end of the first hall, causing a wolf to launch through the window after you. Then there are the brain suckers. They skulk and patrol around the side corridors, and you have to stealth your way towards them or risk getting trapped in place by their magic. I will admit I had a rough go around of these guys this playthrough, especially the 3 on the upper level. I got sucked so hard, but I was able to heal enough to not actually die. As long as you use thrust attacks, you shouldn't have too much trouble with these guys, but don't be reckless as they can swarm you if you're not prepared. A memorable moment comes when you open the large doors on the 2nd floor after handling all the enemies to reveal the iconic make contact gesture. I don't think I've seen a playthrough where someone doesn't laugh at the pose, and it's a nice tension breaker as you realize the horror of the level is mostly over. I'm going to also include the Celestial Emissary and Abriatus Boss arenas in Upper Cathedral Ward. The Lumen Flower Garden is a gorgeous arena, and when you roll through that window and find yourself above the Grand Cathedral, that's a truly eye-opening moment, as you've been down there countless times and never knew what lurked above. Or what lay below. The reveal of the Altar of Despair being right below the Grand Cathedral was mind-blowing. This eldritch cavern with the most intimidating name, holding one of the most iconic base game boss fights, caps off Upper Cathedral Ward beautifully, and really helps you to realize that everyone in Yharnam is completely screwed. Thank you everyone for watching part 1 of my Bloodborne area rankings. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2. I know I have a few controversial areas in my top 10, so I'm excited to justify those rankings to you. Once again, please be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can be notified of all future uploads. My social links are on screen now, feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I'd recommend my Twitter, and a massive shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. Your support means the world and keeps this channel afloat. Adios.